Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 57th edition of Data Bites, hosted by Public Digital. I'm Gavin Freegard, and it's wonderful to see so many of you this evening here at Broadway House and online for our second Environment and Sustainability special of the year. Not bad, we can work on it, that was fine. Let's start in the usual way. Hands up if you've been to Data Bites before. Welcome back. Hands up if this is your first Data Bites. Welcome. Yes, tonight's event is our 57th data variety show. 57 varieties of data goodness. We've rebranded accordingly. I know tonight's speakers are all full of beans. We'll definitely cut the mustard. And we'll be drawing on a variety of data sources. It really will be an evening to relish. You may or may not have caught all of the Heinz-related puns there. If you worried that you missed some of them, you can, of course, watch tonight's video back on ketchup. Sorry. Obviously, we're not really rebranding, but if we were, maybe this is what we should have gone for. Because some of you are probably aware that gov.uk recently got a rebrand, moving from black to blue, with the addition of the dot as our guiding hand for life. Something we like to think is true for Data Bites as well, though I fear I may have gone against some of the style guide there. So let's start with some housekeeping. We are on the record and are being live streamed, obviously. If you're on social media, the hashtag is PDDataBites, and you can put your questions to our speakers via Slido, bit.ly/databytes57, all lowercase. If you're here in the room, you can, of course, raise your hand as well. What does Data Bites do? Well, we aim to put good work involving data, especially in the public sector, on the record so we can all learn from it. Provide a space for the different data communities in and around government to come together and bring to life what better data can do for all of us, whether we think of ourselves as data people or not. How does Data Bites work? This evening, you're going to be treated to 4 presentations on interesting data projects. Each of our speakers will have 8 minutes to present. Yes, just 8 minutes. There are 8 bits in a byte, hence 8 minutes in a data bite. Each speaker will then take questions for 8 minutes. Yes, just 8 minutes. And then we move on to the next speaker. So 4 presentations of 8 minutes, each followed by questions for 8 minutes. You can watch the previous 7 Data Bites at Public Digital, including last month's in Liverpool, or our previous climate special, DB54 in April, at bit.ly/PDDataBites, all lowercase. The 49 before that were hosted by the Institute for Government, and you can watch those at bit.ly/IFGDataBites, capital IFGDB. That includes a climate special, which was DB31 way back in July 2022. Now, before we get to our speakers, we start with our usual recap of what's happened in UK government and politics through the medium of charts. So let's pick up where we left off last month with the various data and digital roles government is currently looking to fill. Now, first, mea culpa, I left one off, and that was the head of the Government Digital Service. But thanks to a parliamentary question this month, we now know that role will be taken by the new Chief Digital Officer when they're appointed. We also now know that the role of National Statistician will be split in 2, at least temporarily. That follows the recent Defra review into the performance and culture of the Office for National Statistics. And we also now have a name to put against one of those roles, with Emran Mian appointed as the new DSIT Perm Sec this week. So 1 down, 5 to go. This government signalled its ambitions for data and digital very soon after being elected, quickly creating the new digital centre of government. And that brings us nicely to this Friday, marking 1 year since the 2024 general election and a remarkable turnaround that brought Labour into government. Cast your minds back to 2019, before the pandemic, before the UK left the EU, and most importantly, before Data Bites moved to Public Digital. This was the majority that Boris Johnson won in the December 2019 general election, Labour's worst result since 1935. That's what it looked like at the end of the Parliament, with by-elections, defections and suspensions. And this is what the House of Commons looked like after the 2024 general election, a big Labour landslide which hasn't shifted too much. But as we discovered yesterday, a large majority doesn't mean political plain sailing. Even after several chaotic concessions, 49 Labour MPs rebelled on last night's welfare vote, and you can see how that starts eating away at even a large majority. Now, it wouldn't be a proper recap without the famous ministerial resignation chart. And the latest of those resignations came a couple of weeks ago, Whip Vicky Foxcroft, over those proposed reforms to disability benefits. That's resignation number 6 for Keir Starmer, roughly the same run rate as Rishi Sunak or Boris Johnson. Now, a year in, the polls don't tell a great story for Labour. They'd fallen below 30% by the end of last year and then fell further. You might expect the official opposition to capitalise. There's Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch, pictured last week. It's amazing that she manages to keep shooting herself in the foot from that angle. But the Tories are also plummeting in the polls, with Reform the main beneficiaries and the Lib Dems and Greens also gaining. Now, the PM's personal approval has also taken a battering. This chart shows net satisfaction with prime ministers in their first year. Brown, Cameron, May are all lower at the end of it, only Boris Johnson with the initial COVID response bucking that trend. This is what Keir Starmer's looks like. Now, as well as visualising that, I'm going to do something we haven't done for a while, which is to sonify the data. Yes, sound and vision. Each note is a data point. The higher the note, the higher the approval. The lower the note, the lower the approval. And it sounds like this. Yes. It was quite a different story for the last Labour Prime Minister to win a landslide, Tony Blair. Let's listen to him. Starmer's stats are actually much closer to Rishi Sunak's. And again, let's listen to that. And some of you will have spotted that we're missing one post-97 Prime Minister. This is what Liz Truss looks like. And what it sounds like. Can always rely on Liz Truss for a laugh. Enough of that. Time for tonight's excellent speakers on the theme of sustainability and the environment. First up is Jennifer Marks from the Government Digital Service on gov.uk One Login, building a green digital service. Our second speaker is Tom Parry from Defra on digital sustainability in UK government. Third will be Kate Marks. You don't have to have the surname Marks to present tonight, but clearly it helps. Kate's from the Environment Agency and we'll be talking about the power of the public tracking environmental harm in real time. And our final speaker tonight will be Chris Pointon from Icebreaker One on scheming. Data Bites will take a summer break over August, but we'll be back in September. Date TBC. Keep an eye on your emails and our socials. If you work for a public sector organisation and would like to speak or know someone who should, come and speak to me afterwards or email events@public.digital. If you enjoy Data Bites and would like to help us out, we'd love to share the Data Bites love with an even wider audience. Please do tell a friend, especially if they work in the public sector, or share something you hear tonight on social media. There'll be some video, audio and some slides available for you to share in the next few days, which you'll be able to find, as well as signing up for future updates at bit.ly/pddatabytes, all lowercase. That's more than enough from me. And our next speaker is Tom. The stage is yours.
Great. Thanks, Gavin. Hi, everyone. So I'm Tom Parry from the Department for Environment, Farming and Rural Affairs. And my job is Head of Digital Sustainability within Defra, but we've got kind of two hats. So one is making sure that Defra Group's own technology is as sustainable as possible, and that includes technology used by about 30,000 staff across Defra Group, including Environment Agency staff that Kate will know about, as well as our public-facing digital services, so things like flood alerts and applying for fishing rod licences and stuff like that we can't do. But we also coordinate some of the work across government taking place on this topic. And one of the kind of things I want to get across in this 8 minutes is that we're really keen to make sure we don't have all the answers in Defra, and we have to lean a lot on others in government and in our supply chain, in academia, to really help us kind of work through some of this stuff. So we certainly are not trying to kind of imply that we've got all the answers here. That being said, I've tried to set out on the next few slides kind of where we think we need to go as government, and some of the opportunities we've got, and to try and do that through a bit of a kind of data lens. So first of all, some scary data. I think if everyone's kind of here already and joined online, you'll kind of hopefully be convinced of the importance of the topic of sustainability. But just if you're not, some charts on the left making the point about the wider kind of climate crisis, about how that is happening to us now, and anyone that was on a bus yesterday would have felt that in the human level. But then the kind of role of IT within that. So that chart in the middle, I think, is still surprising. I've been in this job about a year and a half, and it was surprising to me when I started that the IT industry responsible for more global emissions than aviation and shipping combined, which is a real kind of eye-opener. And then the chart on the left, which is some homemade slideware, so apologies if it's not that clever, but what I'm trying to get across there is that the UK, about 6 million tonnes of e-waste a year, only a third of that is recycled. So the kind of a lot of raw earth materials and stuff go into that. There's a huge kind of opportunity there, but at the moment a big issue too. Within government, that's especially the case. So chart on the left is UK government's ICT emissions. So you can see about 360,000 tonnes CO2 equivalent the last reported year. And it's quite a busy chart on the right, but I think you can hopefully get the overall story is that our volumes of e-waste are going down, but they're still really high. And within that volume, we still want to do more to move the percentage up towards reuse from recycle and keep the percentage going to landfill low. That's particularly important. The Defra Secretary of State's got a real priority around circularity and stuff too that will support. So we're government, so we have a strategy to this, which everyone will be relieved to hear. But we do want to pull together what we're doing because there's so much good work happening within departments. Jennifer's already talked about the one login stuff, and across our supply chain, as I mentioned. But what we want to try and do is to help people put their own work within the kind of context of some key priorities so they know what else is happening, so we don't duplicate stuff, and we kind of line up sensibly. So set some priorities and outputs and sort of say who's doing what. Now is a really good time for it. Gavin mentioned some of the changes going on at government at senior level around this stuff at the start. There's a whole load of new government blueprints and commitments that are happening right now. So if we influence it right, it's a good time to do it. If we don't, we're kind of missing out on a big chance. That strategy's being worked on now, and we welcome input to it. Some high-level themes will be keeping the emissions journey on net zero going, but kind of broadening that out and thinking, how do we make sure that our wider resource use is as circular as possible? We reduce waste. Move on to think about things like water and heat use, kind of beyond carbon, some people call it. I think you could do with some clarity around how we're tackling that. And social value, again, something that we don't often really think about when we talk about sustainability, but it's part of procurements. Often sustainability, social value is one part of procurement. Suppliers have got loads to offer around how they can bring social value to their work. Again, we haven't really kind of articulated what we're looking for. Penultimate one, how we get more resilient to climate risk. We've had data centres falling over in heat waves in the UK recently. In NHS was these examples. That's only likely to get a bigger risk. How do we manage that? How do we adapt to it? The last one is how we make sure that as AI develops and as the next AI comes along, sustainability is kind of thought of as that first becomes a question for people, and it's not something we're playing catch up on. So some big challenges for us there. So a few data-specific points. First of all, data itself is a really big part of this issue. Gavin mentioned a byte and a bit at the start. So a zettabyte is, I think, a billion terabytes. There's about 64 zettabytes stored globally, which roughly equates to 128 billion tonnes of CO2 just from stored data. About 60% of that data is never used. People will be familiar with some of these stats, but you can quibble on them. But the point is, a lot of data is never used, but causing a lot of emissions. AI, people will have seen the news coverage about how AI can drive that. But I do want to just quickly, data can be part of the solution too. So the thing in the top right is San Francisco traffic lights, where Google used AI to reprogram the timings and all those traffic lights to reduce the amount of idling that happened across the, kind of, the street system, and that reduced emissions in San Francisco by, I think, just 10%, just by kind of clever use of data. So the data can help us to... Data insight, talking about emissions, biggest cause of emissions for UK government isn't, at the moment, hosting or how it's the devices people use. And within that, 2/3 of that is not about how much you keep it on the battery life, it's the manufacture and distribution, so making it and sending it out to you. So people say, you know, what one thing can I do? The best thing you can do is hang on to your device as long as possible. But this is what we're trying to get more of this so we can make sure that we're targeting it on kind of where we can have the biggest impact. And within Defra, we've just moved to a new end user contract where the default model would be to use refurbished devices rather than new ones to try and kind of hit that source. Data challenge, the question was asked before about AWS location versus market-based reporting. And it is a difficult one because, you know, AWS and others have shown real willing over the past year to work with us on getting this better. Jennifer kind of mentioned that, you know, they are getting better, and we're getting better at asking them the same thing across government in terms of improving their reporting. But there is still a kind of fundamental thing about trying to encourage people to use actual emissions based on the location of the data center rather than market-based, which is where they can kind of buy certificates that means they can report zero because they can offset what they actually produce by investing in green energy. But, you know, those things in themselves are helpful too, but it's a challenge we have to understand really what we're emitting. And then Jennifer mentioned too, we're getting a lot better based on all that kind of work across government and with suppliers and actually being able to say what we want people to do, what best practice looks like. I put the address in there, but these slides go out, you can look at it yourself. There's a really good set now of, we call them the greener service principles, that look at a digital service kind of life cycle from start to finish and include some of the specific things we want people to do throughout that life cycle, whether it's architecture, DevOps, how you actually build and operate the design. There are some specific ones here for data that I'm not going to go through and read out, but hopefully people can see here some of the stuff that we are trying to encourage people to do that are getting more tangible and helpful for people. And those are all hyperlinks, so if you click on that link, you can go and read these in a bit more detail. Last bit, I mentioned before we have a lot of work from our suppliers. We call it the Government Digital Sustainability Alliance. We've got over 60 organisations in that now. Some of them are in those logos on the right. We also have academic institutions, Oxford University and others are in there. So if anyone is interested in getting involved in that work, contact us on that web address and go and find out more on that address. 8 minutes.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tom. If you want to take a seat, we will turn to questions. A reminder, if you're in the room, obviously you can put your hand up, and you can also use bit.ly/databytes57, all lowercase, to get to Slido. Who would like to go first? First question.
Shall I pick up the one about AWS? Yeah. So if you practical things, so each government department, one of the things we're getting better at is when the departments go out to procure new hosting services or whatever, making sure that we're supporting people better to ask sensible questions so that they can really hold suppliers to account in the bid stage, because once the bid's in the contract signed, we kind of locked into that. So I think the first thing is getting better at doing that. And there is, so government has a set of buying standards that can support that in more detail, and we're influencing that as well. I think too that there is a slight balance between making sure we're really clear about minimum and giving space for suppliers to be innovative and tell us what else they can do on top of that, and we don't want to give them the answer. And in particular, we've got this trade-off between encouraging small enterprises and stuff like that too. But absolutely, I think it's a challenge we're working on. And I think to be fair to AWS and others, some of the big ones have been receptive in the past year, because what they've always asked us for is tell us what government wants, and don't have us going and sort of having to man-mark individual departments. And I think we're getting better at asking that in a clearer way, perhaps, than we've been able to before. But yeah, it's still a challenge.
Brilliant, thanks. Next question. I'll stay in the room. We've got one just there. Just wait for the microphone. Thanks.
Thank you very much for a good presentation. Regarding the localization, I have a question. Does UK have local cloud provider like AWS or Azure. If you use it, maybe it's better for your environmental impact.
So I mean, cross government, the whole different kind of whole different set of cloud providers use, but they include those two, and within their provision, that they will include UK-based data centres. But I mean, a challenge that we have is within the UK, the grid mix can be different in different parts of the country, at different times of day and night. So some of the I think not up there anymore, but some of the best practice we try and encourage people to do is to ask your providers, you know, which regions you're going to be hosting stuff in, because which parts of the country want them to encourage a greener mix. And within that, if you can run your big processes overnight, you're more likely to hit a greener mix of the grid than the daytime. Is that answer the question? Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next question. Got one down the front. We might be able to use the mic on Chris already, I think.
I'm interested in the device element of what you were talking about. A lot of the driver for obsolescence in devices is incompatibility with the software they need to run and operating systems going off version, as it were. What sort of approaches are you finding with that? Are you getting any traction with trying to make devices last longer by making the software continue to be supported?
Yeah, so I think within the kind of device obsolescence point, there's a chunk of it that is just getting people off refresh cycles driven by 4 years time for a new one, moving to performance based. But the whole other chunk of it is talking to the big operating system companies about how they stop pushing people into a refresh. And being honest, Chris, at the moment, you know, there's nothing kind of exciting to say about that, but absolutely, it's something we're gonna have to work through. And I think AI will make that worse, or could make that worse, by the way, because if that drives a requirement for everyone to have, you know, particular systems so they can run AI stuff on their device, that's a thing for us to watch out to. But yeah.
Great, thanks. We're going to go online for the next question. This is from Amal. Good evening to you. How are you currently partnering with researchers and academics? Okay,
so that GDSA that I talked about is absolutely the place we want to do that. I kind of skimmed over it in the slides, but it's any organisation that is interested in supporting this work is welcome to apply to join for that. It's free. All we ask is that people kind of sign up to a code of conduct and a kind of bit of a charter around how they're going to engage with it. But that organisation has just recently published a really good recommendations report on moving to a more circular economy that has been driven by loads of suppliers working in that space and academics. So I would. There's one on that. There's one on AI in particular. We've got another one on kind of the planetary impact of technology. We've got another working group within that organisation looking at how we improve our reporting on Scope 3 emissions and cloud hosting and stuff. So that organisation, and I put the address up, is where people should go to get involved in it. And it's been a really useful partnership for us so far.
Great, thanks. Take another one from the room. We've got one down the front.
Thank you. My name's Rafe. I'd like to ask about how you include the impact of things that are harder to measure than maybe like server power or device embedded emissions. And for the carbon management and infrastructure, that's physical infrastructure standard, that was changed in 2023 to include the whole life cycle. But as I understand, it might be more difficult for you because if someone is using a digital service rather than getting, you know, something printed out or, you know, avoiding a journey, that could actually save a lot of emissions, but it's really hard for you to measure. How do you deal with that?
Yeah. No, sorry, I can't answer that now, but that is exactly, and case in point is when we start talking about AI, how do you measure the kind of the save cost by someone getting to an answer quicker than by having to kind of go through the same query again and again to get to something? I flashed up the kind of strategy stuff, themes. One of those is methodology and measurement. So those kind of nuances, sorry mate, you just can't say, are some of the ones that'd be really good for us to tease out. Perhaps have a chat in a sec to work out a bit more how we how I articulate that. Yeah.
Excellent, thanks. Let's take another question from the room. I can hold silence. Go on. I'll ask you one. I suppose how How will citizens see the benefit of this, and how do you talk to the public about the importance of this work, especially if at some point down the line it might be seen as, I don't want to say a burden, but there might be changes that perhaps they're not expecting that come down the line as a result of it.
So I think something that came out of Jennifer's presentation and that we probably need to get clear about is that sustainability and efficiency often are kind of two sides of the same coin. A lot of the changes that we used to, that we reduce power consumption will also reduce costs. So I think we need to get better at talking about those two things as going hand in hand. Some of the stuff in those greener service principles that I listed will support user experience and stuff too. And I think just being clear about why they're happening. If we can make sustainability a bigger part of the service standard and things too, that will help explain the rationale for them. But I think it's probably a language piece that we get a bit better at doing.
Great, thanks. Any final quick questions in the room? Otherwise, I'll finish with the same question that I asked Jennifer, which was, again, relatively new area. People might be quite new to it. What's your one piece of advice on where to start? So
the one that I would say, I agree with what Jennifer said, but I would say to people to talk to your suppliers, because we have found in Defra, our own IT suppliers often have got internal teams that are looking at this stuff too, and genuinely will have some interesting and innovative ideas that might not be in-house. So I would encourage people to do that.
Fantastic. Well, Tom, thank you very much indeed. And our third speaker tonight is Kate.
Fantastic. Thank you. So I will be talking about the power of the public, tracking environmental harm in real time. Internally, the piece of work is known as Smart Incident Reporting. But I'll start with a user story, because all good digital and data work starts with a user story. So apologies, it's a bit word dense, but I think every line counts on this one. So this was an email that we received into the organisation from a user asking if we had a way to report incidents online, and they recounted their experience in trying to do so. This individual had tried multiple times to list various environmental incidents that they had seen around the country. And this was the latest attempt to log an incident with us so that we could send some people out to look at it and perhaps take enforcement and regulatory action about it. They talk about having no signal at the site location. They were on a train as well. So they didn't have time to ring. The conditions weren't really right. They're on a train. The reception in the rural areas had been poor. The reception on the train line had been poor. All they could do was call the emergency line that we have. They didn't want to talk about sensitive information out in the public domain either. And they were really worried that another report was going to be missed because someone didn't have the time and they didn't have the channels to make the report that they wanted to. They talked about their vision for an online reporting tool. They talked about being able to log it quickly, upload the photos in the exact location, and then move on with other things that could happen in their daily lives. And the last one, particularly key, they were worried that these things were vastly unreported because we didn't have this online reporting capability, other than by the few that have the time. And they may not be the people out there on the land spotting things. Now, it was a great user story. Slight problem with it was that it did come from the chair of the Rural Payments Agency directly into a board member. But the good news story on this was that we were already thinking about this and very much along the lines that this individual had expressed. We'd had a recent incident on a particularly contentious site, which had led to a huge call volume coming in just from this one site, with people reporting odour problems as a result of conditions on this landfill site. Because of that, we had taken a very simplistic approach to developing an online tool, and we had pushed it through various GDS approvals, service approvals, over a period of 10 to 12 weeks to take the pressure off the call centre, because they were receiving hundreds of calls a day just from this one site, and it was causing well-being issues. So we started to test and learn. We had that underway when this email arrived, and it very much validated the approach that we were taking. But that was one individual. What's the problem that we're looking at scale? So at scale, we normally get about 100,000 calls a year to the call centre reporting environmental incidents. Each one of those calls takes about 10 minutes to process, with the reporter effectively dictating what they've seen and a member of the call centre typing it into a system that I think is now 25 years old. It's not the best use of everyone's time all round. People want quicker responses, they want that flexibility, as we talked about. And climate change is expected to lead to more frequent events as well. So if we're getting 100,000 reports a year now about water pollution, odour, flooding, imagine what that could look like in the future. It is not a sustainable position. There are also questions around accessibility. 10 million people in England have a hearing impairment, deafness or tinnitus. That doesn't take into account other issues that might make it difficult for people to use a contact centre, such as contact anxiety, people who don't want to pick up the phone, people where English is not the first language. So there were lots of reasons why we needed to do this differently. We were also concerned about the quality of the reports that we were getting, this being a data talk after all. It was becoming clear that sometimes that was dependent on the person who was taking the report, their training, their expertise in getting the information out of people. It wasn't so much a guided journey because, again, the system was 25 years old underpinning it all. So we designed a to-be service. This very much was based on the Microsoft estate that we already have in the Defra group. And we have gone live with 2 different types of reports at the moment, report to smell and report to water pollution incident, based on feedback that they are the most common reports that we get. We're using things like the Dataverse, Power BI, Power Apps, to push that into the relic system that I talked about, NERS, until we can replace it. And then that will assign duty officers to go out and take a look if it meets the threshold criteria. Very excitingly, we have robotics on it. I think it is the first unattended robot that is being used in the Defra group to take that information and push it into the system. And we now have access to real-time analytics, which previously it would have been a big data download from the legacy system that would have been problematic. So the benefits of this, we're going to get consistent, structured and more accurate data capture. We're going to get better situational awareness, particularly in real time or near real time. And the data will be structured in such a way that it will make it much easier to answer FOI questions and to do work planning for the officers out on the ground. It will lead to improved engagement with affected communities. We can spot the trends a lot quicker and action those, and an easier way for residents to report incidents to us. Moving forward, it will also help with enforcement action for other incident types as we have further releases. So we launched on the 11th of June. It is a soft launch. I think this is the first time we've spoken in public about it since the soft launch, but already we're getting nearly 4,000 reports since we went live 2 weeks ago. Now, if you scale that up over the year, you're getting close to the 100,000 reports we would have had on the telephone. So that shows you the appetite for this, that soft launch, we're getting those figures already. The robot is taking about 37 seconds to process the form and put it into the system. Compare that to the 10 minutes per call we would have spent before. And we've got a really low rejection rate where we're having to manually intervene, which again is great testament to the work that's gone in. Whoop, went a bit far. So as you can see, drilling down into it, I think the data snapshot's slightly different time, hence the difference in total records. You can see we're getting good spread across the country. Again, odour, water pollution coming through, but we're also tracking people trying to report other types so that, again, we can make some decisions around what do we release next, what other incident types do we include in there. We're still getting a lot on the phone, but that's to be expected. We have not advertised this yet to the public. And then future releases, we're looking at mobile devices, I think before the end of the year. Photo uploads from the public, as per that user story at the beginning. Dashboards, we have the dashboards nationally, but we want to make them more available internally and potentially to the public as well. Assisted assessment, so again, we're going to start looking at the opportunities for AI, further automation, further robotics to support assisted assessment and consistent triaging of reports, rules-based work in there. And we will be adding more incident types with illegal fishing, potentially the next one to be released, I think September time. So it's an exciting time to get the data going. This is the team who know far more about it than I do. I sort of stayed with this work until it got to private beta, and I've kind of dipped back in to borrow the slides for today. But I'm happy to take any questions that I can answer. Otherwise, I can put you in contact with the team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate, and honoured this was the first public outing for the service, so thank you. A reminder, as if you need it, that you can put your hand up. You can also use bit.ly/databytes57, all lowercase, if you'd like to ask a question. I'll start in the room. Who wants to go first? Got one right at the back, and I can see two more that will come to you next.
Hi, Paul Clark. In a world where who is responsible can be a very complex patchwork for citizens to navigate, how will you approach interfacing with other likely reporting channels from local government service centres to things like Fix My Street?
That's an interesting question. So we did actually do some initial work during Discovery, I think it was, possibly into Alpha as well, about a join up with Fix My Street, but the data didn't quite work in terms of that relationship between what we need, particularly for potential legal cases in the future. So we didn't go down that route. We are clear on the user journey which ones we are accountable for. And so people can see, they are directed to the local authority if it's an environmental health problem rather than something that is within our remit. So we're trying to make that clear on the website. But I agree, there is more work to be done on the join up. My background is in flooding. We have a very similar issue in flooding where local authorities do certain types of flooding and we do other types of flooding. And again, we did a lot of work there to try and join up that connection with a member of the public who just sees it as flooding and doesn't understand the different organisational remit. So it's a work in progress, but it's one we're very conscious of.
Great, thank you. We'll come there next, and I'll come to you next.
Thank you. That was actually my question, but it was such a good one, sorry. I'd like to maybe develop it. If someone is wanting to ask AI, how do I, make this complaint? Or maybe they've downloaded the new gov.uk app. How would your service interface with those other kind of channels in?
So the service is on gov.uk. That is where it has been soft launched. So sorry, I should have made that clear. So if you go in now, you will find it's actually called Report an Environmental Problem, if anyone wants to go away and have a look. Please don't send in any dummy reports. It is now live, not in beta. But if you want to go and have a look, you will see Report an Environmental Problem. It is on gov.uk. As I say, as they develop it, we've been going 2 weeks. It is still very much test and learn. They'll look at integrations. They'll look at user journeys. They'll look at whether there's overlap or the stats around where the journeys are getting broken, where they're not completing. All of that will start to come out in the wash and show us, have we got the connections right? Have we got the content design right, etc.
I'm actually going to jump to the online question before I come to Matt, because it follows on quite nicely. This is from Amal again. Thank you very much for this one. How do you gather user feedback to ensure the design of the system is intuitive and easy to use?
Thank you. So, during private beta, we did work with quite a lot of different user groups. We worked with some citizen groups that were representative of people who would normally be reporting this sort of incident. I think there were about 1,000 people that were kind of consulted during the private beta stage. We've also had obviously feedback from the call centre as to what people have had problems with in logging calls with us on that side. Now it is live. I haven't checked this myself, but it's fairly standard in how we do things in the Environment Agency. There will be feedback form options attached to the service. So when people have gone through the journey, they will be able to click a button somewhere where they can give feedback. As I say, it's standard on a lot of our other incident services. So I would fairly confidently say that they've done that in this one as well.
Great, thank you. Let's come down here next.
Thanks. I was just going to pick up on the point you were making about sort of future sort of work, but particularly around sort of where you mentioned about sort of maybe making sort of dashboards public. And I wondered whether the thought process was either, is that from a sort of just analytical perspective of sort of saying, oh, here are the incidents that have been reported in the last 6 months, last year, etc., see what's been going on in this particular area type thing? Or is it more like the sort of, I know when I walk down the street and I see a leak, I can go onto Thames Water and I can see the live issue. And and there's two different sort of user cases in those sort of perspectives. So I wondered, is it both of those, or is one of those leading thinking more than others?
I think it's both of those, and I think it's too early to say. One of the things we did look at again early on in the journey was, I think it's London Fire Brigade, who very much do we're responding to incident X in this location. And it is that immediate situational awareness for the public. So they know that they don't necessarily have to report it again. They can see it's already in the system. But equally, you can do a bit of a trend analysis on your live data to say, oh, this might be a bit of a hotspot. If 100 people have reported this to us, maybe that's the thing we prioritise, given how many reports that we've had. Although there are opportunities for gaming the system that way if you're not careful. So it's an area we're exploring very much from that. Is there something we can show here around the trends, the patterns, and is there something we can do around live situational awareness? But yeah, out to the public will be a few more hoops to go through, I think.
Thanks. I want to go online for the next question. Not the one where somebody has apologised for reporting a fake incident about a sewage spill at Manchester Airport. But to be aware that if you find that one, that's false. Anonymous, a different Anonymous, I think, asks, did you face any issues or challenges while building the case for a digital system?
Oh, that's going to take longer than 2.5 minutes. So I think it's the usual issues in that everybody understood the user need for it. But then you get into prioritisation against other critical pieces of work and you get into the funding challenges. We follow the standard template of having to projectise everything to get money. Which meant there was a little bit of a disconnect between getting the money for the project versus a live service view of we will also need the money to run this, and we won't necessarily, particularly in the early days, release enough call centre staff to show the cost benefit of this. It's one of those things that we think will scale as you get more data and it gets to be used in more innovative ways within the organisation, for things like spotting enforcement patterns, regulatory patterns to make us intelligence-led policing equivalent. We think it will really start to snowball and get some real cost benefits behind it. But that kind of early stage, this is actually going to need a real investment to get you to that point of data driving the organisation in a different way. That was where the challenge was, not the use case, the financials.
Great, thank you. We can squeeze in a final question from the room. We've got one here. There's the mic.
Hi, I was interested in what the plans are to replace the system that records the data, because it sounds like quite archaic. Knowing it myself, I work for the Environment Agency as well. What the plan is if this scales up, because it's soft launch, as we approach different types of incident reporting, what the plan is there?
So the plan is being developed. I think this is attempt number 2 or 3 to replace it. Ironically, it's actually quite a robust system, despite being 25 years old. When we ported it to things like Windows 11, we were really worried, Windows 10 I think it was, we were really worried it was going to fall over. And actually, it was the thing that held up the best out of all of our systems, I think, because there's probably not a lot you can break in it. But if it breaks, it's gone. It's largely unrecoverable. So they are working up the plans to go at that again. I think what we've got here, particularly by using the Microsoft estate and making the most of Power Apps and Power Platforms and all the great tech that Tom and his colleagues, support us with, I think there's a different way that we can get to the same system solution for that core management tool. So it's being worked up at the moment. Next.
Excellent. Well, we shall watch that space. Kate, thank you very much indeed. And our final speaker this evening is Chris.
Thanks very much. Into the final lap, just me between you and the bar, so I'll try and keep it snappy. My name's Chris Pointon. I'm Product Manager for Trust Services at Icebreaker One. I'll talk a bit more about what Icebreaker One does during the presentation. But I'm going to talk about going from sustainability in IT and sustainability in services to sustainability in data governance and the exciting world of data governance as it stands at the moment, and how it can help us get to a more sustainable future. So, digital public infrastructure. Anybody recognise that term? A year ago, probably you didn't, because the rest of the world wasn't talking about it. But somewhere around the end of last year, it got really exciting, and lots of people were talking about digital public infrastructure. So I thought I'd unpack for you what digital public infrastructure is. It is a socio-technical solution. So what it means is it's got bits of society and governance and thoughts and people coming together and designing it, all the way through to really hardcore tech stuff like security and data exchange. And what you need to understand about this is that you need all of those components for a digital public infrastructure to actually work. I'm also going to notice another thing that's happened recently. We've had the Data Use and Access Act. I've just about got used to saying Act rather than Bill on that, passed a mere 2 weeks ago. Basically, that is primary legislation that sets the scene, amongst other things, for a lot of data sharing schemes to come rolling out, schemes to improve public services, to generate value in the economy. And these are coming hot and fast. The smart meter consent one is actually already running at RECCO, and there are others on other sectors coming out of this bill that we're expecting to see in the next couple of coming months and years. Each one of these schemes is one of these. It is a piece of digital public infrastructure. It needs to have all of these considerations taken into account as it's rolled out. Problem is that a lot of initiatives I've come across, and we've come across at Icebreaker One, start at the wrong end, in our opinion. They start at the technical end. They think, right, we're going to make some tech that people can use, and then we'll layer on the governance and the public benefit and the services that are needed and the thought that goes into how this plays out in a marketplace. The important stuff is at the left-hand end of this, the socio end of the socio-technical, because if you don't get that right, that money, the innovation, the consumer confidence, the trust isn't built. The tech can sit there and be unused, and basically unused digital public infrastructure is not much use to anybody. You need people to come along the journey with you. So you need to really concentrate on these. I'll come back to those in a minute. And I'll also explain why I've been talking about all of this sustainability-based data talk. So Icebreaker One, we are a non-profit. We've been around for nearly about 5.5 years now. And our mission is to make data work harder to get to net zero. And we're all about data governance. We're not really thinking so much about what the data is. It's how is the data managed, how can you trust it, and how can it be deployed to get us to net zero, both on carbon emissions and nature and biodiversity loss, so that we are starting to reverse the challenges that we've got at the moment with sustainability. We've done it in a number of sectors. Predominantly, probably our most active area is with energy. We've been funded over several years with the Open Energy Project, which is all about data governance within the energy sector and between the energy sector and its stakeholders. We've also been on the STREAM consortium for 2 years on the water sector. We're really pleased we're starting to see work going on in food supply chains, and fairly hot off the presses news that we are starting to work on nature with the Task Force for Nature-Based Financial Disclosures, a UN effort, to get better trusted data flowing through financial disclosures related to nature. Finally, we've also been working on a sort of a cross-sectoral project called Perseus, which I'm going to drill into a bit because it's an example of one of these schemes that actually already exists. It is a real live smart data scheme, not one of the ones that people are planning. So in Perseus, we spotted an opportunity for smart meter data from small businesses to be aggregated up through carbon accounting platforms and reported to banks, so banks can use it to inform their green loans. Basically, you can lend money to a small business to decarbonise, to put solar on the roof or to fit a heat pump, but you can also see directly the impact by understanding that by going straight from the smart meter data to the emissions through the carbon accounting platform, you've got verifiable information about what the impact of your lending has been and also what the situation was beforehand. The situation with Perseus, we kind of convened the stakeholder group in 2023 and worked out, oh right, we're going to do this and we're going to do it with electricity data to start with, but we'll do it with other data later. And we need to work out the rails that this all goes on. So in 2024, we did a lot of the design work and got ourselves up to a pilot, which has been running this year, where we have actual data from small businesses being used, in the case of the Development Bank of Wales, to finance an intervention for a small business to put some solar on the roof of their go-kart business, in the intention that later on they'll be able to have electric go-kart business, which is the long-term plan that they're investing in. So it's great to see this is actually up and running. What I thought I'd share a little bit from that process of doing a smart data scheme for real was some of the socio end of the process that was necessary, the early bits. Because I think as people are scheming about schemes at the moment, out in government and more broadly in the economy, really understanding the soft bits, in inverted commas, the bits about convening is important to make sure that the thing you end up with is fit for purpose and people will get on board it. So going back to my, my 3 bits of socio end of the public digital infrastructure, what we found on inclusion and equity is, as a not-for-profit, Icebreaker 1 has been able to convene a wide range of people in Perseus. So we've got several banks working together. We've got several, well, probably 30 or so carbon accounting platforms who are competitors in the market collaborating. And the reason they trust the process is that we don't have any skin in the game of the output. We're not trying to sell something at the back of it. Our purpose is to convene and design. I think that's really important. The second one is also about public benefit. One of the things Icebreaker 1 holds as a really central tenet is we need use cases to drive what the infrastructure is going to deliver for people. And by use cases, it means actual value being delivered to an end user of the infrastructure. We often get use cases that are technology ones. This technology will do X, but we don't have so many that are about benefit. When you do the benefit and you work it through, you can then work out the legal side and you can work out the value to the participants, and that's deeply important for people to buy into data sharing infrastructure. And then finally, on governance and trust, we've done a lot of work across all of the projects and particularly in Perseus on making the process, the consideration process of discussing and designing and describing a data sharing scheme a repeatable process. I wouldn't say we've been around the block enough times to say that it's a guaranteed hit, but we've definitely got some good ideas for how to both structure the thinking and represent the output so that the technology end, the technical bits of the socio-technical divide continuum, can go and build it, because you obviously need to design something that people can build. You also need to design something that lawyers can legislate for and that auditors can audit. So all of that comes into how well you describe something. And so I think that's somewhere we've done quite a lot of work. So as we often say, trusted data sharing should be as simple as possible, but no simpler. This isn't easy stuff. It's quite fudgy. And so you really need to be quite sort of flexible in how you bring people together and discuss it. So I guess my call is, if you are scheming about schemes in any way, even if you're scheme adjacent, please talk to us. We have a free network called the Constellation, which is everybody who's interested in this sort of stuff. And our purpose with that is to get people talking about opportunities for data sharing schemes and to learn from one another and to identify collaborative opportunities within that. So please do join that. And hopefully we will scheme a lot of schemes in the next few years, and some of them will get us closer to net zero. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Time for our last round of questions. It's bit.ly/databytes57, all lowercase if you're not already on Slido. But let's start in the room. Who would like to ask the first question? Got a hand there, just wait for the mic.
Hi, I'm Catherine from DESNES. We are very conscious about public attitudes to smart metering, data sharing being a sort of, there's pros and cons to increasing our use of smart metering, and as we're trying to get more and more people to adopt smart meters and the risks around, the perceived risks around how that data might be used. Did you come across similar sorts of, I'm interested in that attitude in the private sector or amongst companies. Are there similar concerns, or how did you get over any sort of expressions of concern about how companies' smart metering data might be used?
There absolutely were those concerns, and one of the things we realised as we did the project is that for small businesses in the UK, many of them are sole traders and are actually individuals as well as being businesses, so you have to consider that too. One of the things that we designed quite early into Perseus, based on feedback from the Federation of Small Businesses, was that only data useful to the bank to make their lending decision and their compliance checks would be shared with the bank. The businesses were quite uncomfortable with sharing detailed consumption information that maybe gave away operational hints to their lenders about what they were doing. And so part of the deal was to work out, okay, well, we don't mind sharing that with a carbon accounting platform that is our platform to aggregate it. But the banks see monthly aggregate data. But the banks know that that aggregate data is based on half-hourly smart meter data. So they can also see things like load shifting, the sort of thing we were talking about, running loads at greener points when the grid is greener. So I think part of it is only sharing what is necessary and really having that conversation about what is necessary to the banks. The banks ultimately said, we don't really care about the half-hourly stuff as long as we know this information has come from that sort of source. And so again, in the trust framework, the rules are within the scheme that the banks can't see the detailed information. Auditors could see, so there is a potential for audit, but that's a different thing. Did that answer the question? Yeah, great.
Thank you very much. I might go online for the next one. This is from Anonymous. Quite a broad one, potentially. Do you use systems thinking, or are there other frameworks that you prioritise?
We do use systems thinking. I wouldn't say that we are sort of dogmatic adherents to it, but we are very much aware that this sort of situation is a complex system and you can have unexpected results and you need to think them through. I'd say probably the most, the main tool we use is more about consensus building and finding common ground on potentially where there isn't a clear yes or no answer, that there are many stakeholders, they've got lots of different ideas for what might happen, and trying to find a way forward that's beneficial and understand the value. I'd say we do more of that than systems analysis. I think it would be interesting to see how that layers in.
Great, thank you. Let's take another question in the room. We've got one just at the front.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. You touched up the kind of slide with different
sectors as some of the areas of interest. Just interested, you talked a bit about the kind of food sector and some of the agri sort of work in agri. Just a bit more about that. Be interesting to hear about some.
Well, it's very early days. Yeah. We were involved in a digital catapult project around it started about data governance in general between farm and food. And then we narrowed it down again, trying to find a use case that could be much more concrete, that we could actually ask questions of, would you share data for this purpose? And so that narrowed down to use of fertilizer in arable farming, which is a big emissions factor, and unlocking finance from agricultural banking to maybe pay for slightly more expensive, lower carbon fertilizer, or for machinery that would reduce the input, so you'd lower the amount of fertilizer being used, full stop. And so what we did was really a proof of concept of a data flow and the assurance and information mechanisms that you would need for the financial institution to be willing to lend. And again, it's a bit like Perseus, to see that possibility. And I think a lot of our work ends up joining the financial economy with the real economy. So it's like money is one of the things, and resources need to flow into sustainability in order to accelerate what we're doing. And so a lot of our projects tend to be getting trusted data into people who hold money and resources, so they're more willing to deploy them, or willing to deploy them at greater scale. And we certainly don't intend to sit on our laurels on the supply chains project. It was a small thing. We are currently talking with, working with Digital Catapult, who we did that one with, to see where we can take it next. We're very interested in where it will go next.
Thanks. Any other questions in the room? So one thing about DPI, digital public infrastructure, it seems to be quite a popular topic in sort of international development and sort of internationally, globally at the moment. Where else have you sort of been looking for inspiration? Are there particular countries that you've been looking to think about how to do this?
Certainly, there's a lot going on in India. There's a lot to learn from India, and a lot to learn about how India does something that would be different to how we could do it in the UK. Brazil has rolled out open banking and probably gone further forward with it than the UK's open banking is at the moment. Australia did a big thing, as I'm sure the digital ID guys at the UK government are aware of. The Australian ID program has faltered a bit, and I'm not sure that the jury is in as to what exactly that is, but it seems like they've had some real grinding of the gears in that program. And then, of course, in the EU, they've spent a lot of money on the Gaia-X data infrastructure, the data spaces work, which, you know, I personally think was partly that slide that says they started with the tech rather than with the governance. I feel like what's coming out of data spaces discussions in the EU in the last year or so is starting to realise that and come into the necessity to support and design in governance, as well as provide technical infrastructure for data to move around. So there's loads going on, more than I can. Yeah, I can't even go deep on this stuff. I just kind of, there's that, and we're trying to spot patterns and things we can bring in. And we are constantly talking to the open banking guys, to CFIT, who are doing the open finance. We want to make sure that anything we're coming up with aligns really closely with those initiatives, so that identity is shared. So perhaps a bank that's identified in open banking can be identified in Perseus exactly the same way with its digital identity. And also that some of the, it's really important that the legal and licensing parts of this stuff become interoperable. Because if you can't with any certainty get data from sector A through sector B to sector C, because the licenses just don't match, you've got a real data sharing problem. And so ways of describing licensing, we're very interested in any conversation about how we can smooth the way with that, using some patterns that mean you can use machines to check. So the machine can actually go, oh yes, my use is compatible with this license, I can just get on with it, which is where we'd like to get to.
Fantastic. Well, on that hopeful note of where you want to get to, Chris, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
And now I'm the only thing between you and the end of the event. And for those of you in the room, some drinks at the back. Some very quick parish notices from me. You'll be able to watch a lot of this back on YouTube or Slido after the event. There will be a blog post with some summary as well. Please do share all of that with people that you know. The next Data Bites will be in September. We will be taking that break for August. Do sign up for updates, bit.ly/PDDataBites, all lowercase. Rob was looking for speakers and suggestions, so please do get in touch with us, events@public.digital. All that remains for me to say are some very big thank yous to PD for hosting, as ever, to all of you for coming and some great questions tonight. And please do join me in thanking our 4 fantastic speakers this evening. Thank you very much indeed.